The academy was silent that morning, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Rows of cadets sat in the great hall, their uniforms a patchwork of colors from a dozen worlds. The air carried the faint smell of metal and ozone, a reminder that this was not a place for scholars, but for soldiers. This was the Galactic War Academy, the training ground for the most dangerous fighters in known space. Every cadet here had been bred, trained, or engineered for combat. And yet, that day, every one of them leaned forward in curiosity as the headmaster stepped onto the platform and cleared his throat. He spoke slowly, his deep voice carrying through the room. Today, he said, we welcome a transfer student. From a distant world, he paused, letting the words hang. You will find this one different. That pause made the room restless. Murmurs rippled between cadets. Transfers were almost unheard of, and most here had trained since childhood to earn their place. Whoever this was, they must be extraordinary, or very foolish to be sent here. The doors at the far end slid open with a hiss. At first, the cadets saw nothing unusual. A tall, lean figure stepped into the hall, dressed in the plain black uniform of the academy. His skin was pale, his hair dark, his face unreadable. There were no claws, no armored plates, no glowing eyes. He looked almost fragile compared to the towering reptilians, the plated insectoids, the broad-shouldered ursids in the room. Then they noticed his eyes. Cold, sharp, and steady, they moved across the crowd like a predator scanning a herd, and he was smiling. It was not the awkward smile of someone nervous. It was slow, calm, almost lazy, like a man who already knew how the day would end. That unsettled them. No one smiled on their first day here. First days were for fear, for tension, for proving you belonged. But the human, yes, that was what he was. One of those so-called primitives from a planet called Earth walked. As if this was all beneath him. Cadets, the headmaster said, this is Ethan Cross. The name meant nothing to them. But the way the headmaster's jaw tightened when he said it, that did not go unnoticed. Ethan moved to the center of the hall, his boots echoing against the floor. A hulking reptilian cadet leaned back in his seat and muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear, I've seen humans before. They break easy. Laughter broke out from his side of the room. Ethan's eyes slid toward the sound, not quickly, not with anger, just a slow, assessing glance, as though he were measuring the weight of that voice, the shape of those claws, the distance to the throat. Then he looked away without a word. The reptilian's grin faded just a little. The headmaster continued, Ethan comes to us under special order from the council. He has already completed training on his homeworld. His methods will differ from what you know. Him and you will learn. There was something in the way he said that last part, something that made even the veterans in the room shift uncomfortably. The instructor at the far end, silver-skinned being with 4 eyes, stepped forward. We'll begin with evaluation. Drills tomorrow, Ethan. Take your seat. Ethan gave a small nod and moved toward the empty bench near the center. As he passed, cadets stared at him, some curious, some amused, some quietly wary. He seemed to notice each glance without ever turning his head. When he sat, he rested his hands on the table in front of him, relaxed but ready. The silver-skinned instructor began outlining the schedule, but no one was really listening. Their attention kept drifting back to the human, to that calm, patient smile. There was something about it like a knife wrapped in silk. One cadet, a tall insectoid with blades folded along its forearms, leaned toward its seatmate and whispered, He's not armed. No armor, no weapons. What threat could he had stopped mid-sentence as Ethan's eyes flicked toward it, when for a heartbeat the insectoid felt as though the human had already thought of 3 ways to kill it. Before the whisper even ended, the meeting broke up soon after. Cadets spilled out into the corridors, the chatter loud and full of speculation. Some swore he was just a political token, sent to make humans look important. Others whispered about rumors about secret human wars, fought in darkness, about colonies that vanished without a trace. And some, though they would not admit it, felt the first edge of unease. Ethan walked alone down the hall, his steps unhurried. 2 cadets blocked his path, the reptilian from earlier and his insectoid friend. The reptilian grinned wide, showing Rows of jagged teeth. Herd humans are slow, he said. He stepped closer, towering over the human. Ethan didn't move back. He didn't even stand. He looked up, met the reptilian's eyes, and smiled again. "You could try," he said quietly, "but I promise you wouldn't like how it ends." Did it? Reptilian froze. There was no threat in the human's tone, no raised voice, just certainty. And something in that certainty felt heavier than any weapon. The two cadets stepped aside. Ethan kept walking, the same slow, even pace. Behind him, the reptilian muttered under his breath, "He's dangerous." The insectoid didn't answer. It was still trying to shake off the feeling that the human had already marked both of them in his mind. In the command office, the headmaster watched from a security feed. One of his aides glanced over and said, "Do you think they understand what he is yet?" The headmaster's gaze stayed on the human as he replied, "Not yet. Psst, but they will." And far down the hall, Ethan's smile stayed exactly the same. The next morning came with the sound of alarms echoing through the academy halls. Lights pulsed in the ceiling, guiding the cadets toward the training arena. The air here was colder, sharper, carrying the metallic temps of blood and sweat from hundreds of past drills. Every cadet knew what the first day's evaluation meant. It was not about skill alone. It was about survival, dominance, and proving you deserve to be here. Ethan Cross walked into the arena with the same slow, steady pace he had used the day before. His black uniform was plain, his hands empty, his face unreadable. Around him, cadets from a dozen species adjusted their armor, flexed their claws, and cracked their joints in preparation. He wore nothing for protection. That alone made some laugh from the control booth above. Silver-skinned instructor's voice echoed through the space. "Cadets, today you will face your first evaluation. Unarmed combat until submission. Victory is claimed when your opponent can no longer continue. No killing, this is training." The instructor's tone carried a hint of warning, as if the rule was aimed at someone in particular. The match list appeared on the massive display. Names scrolled past until the crowd saw Ethan Cross versus Drask Varn. A ripple of excitement swept through the stands. Drask was a reptilian warrior, almost 2 meters tall, his body covered in thick scaled armor. His claws could slice through bone, his tail could crush ribs in a single blow. He had defeated every opponent he faced in training, often in seconds. Now he would face the human. Drask stepped into the ring, flexing his claws for the crowd. "You ready to break, human?" he growled. His voice was deep, carrying across the arena. Ethan stepped forward, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. "Let's find out," the signal sounded. Drask wasted no time. He lunged, a blur of muscle and claws aiming for Ethan's throat. The human didn't move until the last possible moment. Then he shifted sideways, just enough for the claws to miss, his body turning with effortless precision. Drask stumbled past, caught off balance. Ethan didn't strike. He simply watched, eyes sharp, movements economical. The crowd roared. Some shouted insults, others laughed. But a few cadets went silent. They recognized something in the humans. Stillness, it was not hesitation, it was patience. Drask snarled and came again, faster, more vicious. This time Ethan's hand shot out, catching the reptilian's wrist mid-swipe. The movement was too quick for most to see. With a sharp twist and a sudden pull, Ethan used Drask's momentum against him. The massive cadet slammed to the floor, his claws scraping the surface with a harsh screech. Drask roared in rage, his tail whipping toward Ethan's head. Without looking, Ethan ducked under it, stepping in close. His palm struck the side of Drask's janot, a heavy blow, but perfectly placed. The reptilian's head snapped sideways, his eyes momentarily dazed. Ethan stepped back, letting him recover, still not pressing the attack. From the stands, whispers began to spread. "He's not even trying. Why isn't he finishing it? What is he doing?" Drask staggered up, fury blazing in his yellow eyes. He charged again, claws wide. This time, Ethan moved. Not away, but forward inside the reptilians. Reach. His hands moved in a blur, striking at vulnerable points along Drask's arm, ribs, and neck. Each hit was precise, efficient, and devastating. In less than 3 seconds, Drask was on his knees. Gasping for air, Ethan stepped behind him, locked an arm around his throat, and spoke low enough that only Drask could hear. That was me holding back. Then, with a firm push, he released him and stepped away. The signal blared match over. Drask collapsed to the floor, coughing, his body shaking from the sudden shock to his system. The instructor's voice was flat. Winner, Ethan Cross. The arena was silent for a moment. Then the noise exploded, half the cadets shouting in disbelief, the other half in awe. Ethan walked back toward the edge of the ring without a word, his expression unchanged. That calm smile was still there, as if nothing had happened. In the control booth, the headmaster folded his arms. "He's toying with them," one of the aides muttered. The headmaster didn't disagree. "No," he said quietly. "He's studying them." In the locker room afterward, Ethan sat alone, cleaning a faint smudge of dust from his sleeve. A young avian cadet approached cautiously. "That move you used? The throw. Where did you learn that?" Ethan looked up, his eyes locking onto the cadets. "Back home," he said simply. "Where you learn to fight by fighting." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Outside, Drask sat on a bench, still rubbing his throat. The insectoid cadet from the day before approached him. "What happened in there? You could have crushed him." Drask's claws tightened. Tried, but he wasn't there. "What do you mean?" Drask's voice was low, almost a growl. "When I attacked, it felt like he knew exactly where I'd be before I did. He's not fast, he's something else." The insectoid tilted its head. "Something else?" Drask didn't answer. He just stared at the ring where the human had stood, faint echo of that smile still fresh in his mind. Later that night, as lights dimmed across the academy, 2 cadets slipped into the restricted archive chamber, their curiosity boiling over. They wanted to know how a human could defeat Drask so easily. The doors slid shut behind them, and the cold glow of the archive's data pillars lit the room. They didn't yet know it, but what they were about to read would change everything they thought they knew about humanity. The archive chamber was buried deep beneath the academy, behind thick alloy doors and layers of security most cadets never even saw. It was a cold, silent place, its walls lined with data pillars, each glowing faintly with stored knowledge. The air smelled faintly of dust and ozone, and every footstep echoed in the stillness like an accusation. 2 cadets slipped inside, their hearts pounding not from the physical effort of bypassing the doors, but from the knowledge that if they were caught here, expulsion would be the least of their problems. One was Soren, a thin insectoid with blades folded along its forearms. The other, Ketha, was a tall avian with sharp amber eyes and feathers dark as night. Both had been at the academy long enough to know that the real truths of war were never found in the classrooms. They were locked away in places like this. And tonight, they were here for one truth in particular: Ethan Cross. They moved quickly between the data pillars, scanning the labels for anything related to Terrans, humans, or Earth. Most of the files they passed were dull species histories, battle records, outdated treaties. But then Ketha stopped, suddenly. Her eyes fixed on a glowing red tag at the far end of the chamber. Terran Warfare Protocols level red clearance required. "That's it," she whispered. Soren's blades twitched uneasily. "Level red means lethal security countermeasures." Ketha tapped the access panel. "Only if the system detects you're unauthorized, and we are unauthorized. That's why you're going to bypass it." Soren hissed softly, but its hands were already working. A series of clicks, code pulses, and bypass loops later, the lock chimed open with a muted tone.
"Oh, yeah, the pillars."
Holographic interface flared to life, and a flood of classified files spilled across the projection. The 2 cadets leaned closer. The first document they opened was a species profile. It described humans in the dry, detached language of military. Science bipedal primates from a mid-gravity world, oxygen-breathing, omnivorous. Their physical strength ranked low compared to most Academy species. Their reaction speed was above average but not exceptional. On paper, There was nothing extraordinary about them. And yet, the next file was different. It wasn't dry analysis. It was a battle report. The text described a skirmish on the mining world of Kirithfor, where a human squad of only 8 soldiers faced an enemy force of over 200. By all tactical models, the humans should have been annihilated in the first hour. Instead, they eliminated the enemy to the last fighter in less than 40 minutes. How? Soren murmured. Ketha scrolled further. The answer was in the footage embedded in the file. The hollow projection flickered, and the cadets found themselves looking at grainy combat recordings. The humans moved like shadows slipping through cover, using every scrap of terrain, attacking from angles the enemy didn't even think to guard. They fought in perfect coordination without visible signals, as if each one could read the other's thoughts. And they didn't hesitate, not once. The most disturbing part wasn't the speed of their attacks, but their adaptability. When one tactics stopped working, they changed instantly, without any pause, without orders from a commander. Every move seemed to be calculated 3 steps ahead. Ketha's feathers rose slightly. That's not training, that's instinct. Opened another file. This one detailed human endurance. It claimed that in survival conditions, humans could run prey to exhaustion over hours or even days, that they could function in extreme temperatures, survive wounds that would kill others, and keep fighting after losing blood or suffering broken bones. One section described humans' ability to stay conscious and dangerous even after injuries that rendered other species unconscious instantly. Soren's voice was a whisper now. Predators. Ketha's eyes narrowed. Pack predators. They found more footage this time, a night raid on an enemy outpost.
Ow.
No lights, no sound. The humans moved through the darkness like ghosts, their eyes catching the faintest light, their bodies blending into the black. The first enemy didn't even know they were there until it was too late. Soren closed the file, its mind reeling. Why would the council hide this? Ketha's beak clicked once, a sound of grim realization. Because they want everyone to believe humans are weak. And if this got out, everyone would know the truth. They started to back away from the pillar, but then Soren froze. One final file caught its eye. It wasn't about history or biology or tactics. It was a current assignment report. The header made both cadets' blood run cold. Subject: Ethan Cross. Field evaluation status: observation of alien. Cadet response to Terran combat methodology. Objective: gather performance data for council review. Secondary objective: assess potential threat classification. Ketha's voice was tight. They didn't bring him here to learn from us. Soren finished the thought. They brought him here to study us. Before they could say more, a sharp chime echoed through the chamber. The security field shimmered to life, and a cold mechanical voice filled the air. Unauthorized access detected. Security en route. Panic surged through them. They killed the display and bolted for the exit, their footsteps hammering against the metal floor. Behind them, heavy doors began to seal, and the distant thump of armored security drones grew louder. They barely made it through the last door before it slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the corridor. Breathing hard, they didn't speak until they were far from the archives. Soren's blades were trembling slightly, not from exhaustion, but from what they had seen. "What do we do with this?" it asked. Ketha looked back over her shoulder, eyes dark. "We watch him closely, and we make sure we're not on the wrong side when the time comes." Neither of them noticed the small black surveillance drone hovering silently in the shadows above the archive entrance, its lens glowing faint red dot far away. In a private chamber, the headmaster received the live feed, watched the cadets run, and the files they had opened. Then his gaze shifted to the final image of Ethan Cross, sitting alone in his quarters, sharpening a combat knife with slow, steady strokes. The headmaster leaned back in his chair. "They're starting to learn," he murmured, and somewhere in the dark, Ethan smiled, though no one could see why. The training arena had been rebuilt for the Academy's largest war simulation. Massive holoprojectors painted towering alien forests, jagged cliff lines, and distant smoke rising from an enemy base. Automated drones hummed overhead, recording every movement. The cadets stood in formation, each group armed with non-lethal training weapons. It was meant to be a test of teamwork, tactics, and adaptability, safe, controlled. And under strict supervision, Ethan Cross stood at the edge of his assigned squad, his black uniform blending into the shadows of the simulated forest. His squad looked at him with mixed feelings. Some still remembered how he dismantled Drask in seconds, others still doubted him. The silver-skinned instructor floated in the observation booth above. Objective. His voice rang out. Capture the enemy command post within 2 hours. All weapons set to stun. Good luck, cadets, the signal blared. Squads broke formation, rushing into the holographic terrain. Ethan's squad stumbled almost immediately, 2 of them arguing over which path to take, another charging ahead without cover. Ethan said nothing, letting them make their mistakes. He kept his pace slow, eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement in the simulated trees. Then it happened. A faint crackle of static filled the air. The holoprojection flickered. For a second so brief most cadets didn't notice. But Ethan did. His eyes narrowed. The air smelled different now, sharper, tinged with ozone and something else. The faint metallic scent of real energy weapons powering up. The first blast came without warning. Stun beam meant for training shouldn't have burned through armor. This one did. A cadet from another squad screamed as their shoulder plate melted. Smoke rising from the impact. Chaos erupted. The instructor's voice cut through the coms. All units, hold position. We have his words cut off in a burst of static. The coms went dead. Ethan dropped to a knee instantly, scanning the tree line. The movement was wrong, too fast, too deliberate for Academy drones. Shapes emerged. From the mist, mercenaries, armored in dull black plating, their weapons set to lethal. Whoever they weren't part of the simulation. Contact left, Ethan said quietly, his voice calm but sharp. His squad froze for half a heartbeat, then turned toward the threat. But panic was already breaking them. One cadet fired wildly. Another backed away without cover. The mercenaries opened fire. Ethan moved like water sliding from cover to cover, pulling a stunned cadet out of the line of fire, directing another. To higher ground, short bursts. Keep your heads down, he ordered, voice cutting through the panic. There was no shouting, no wasted words, just precise instructions. Each one meant to save a life. 3 mercenaries tried to flank them from the ridge above. Ethan was already moving before his squad spotted them. He scaled the rocky slope in seconds, using handholds others would miss, and hit the ridge just as the first mercenary stepped into position. Ethan's hand caught the weapon's barrel, twisting it away in a single smooth motion before driving an elbow into the attacker's throat. A sweep of his leg took the second mercenary off balance, sending him tumbling down the ridge. The third hesitated just long enough for Ethan to wrench the first mercenary's sidearm free and fire twice, both shots clean. Both targets down from the observation booth. The headmaster's eyes narrowed. This wasn't training anymore, and yet the human was performing as though it was exactly what he'd been waiting for. Ethan dropped back to his squad, tossing the captured weapon to one of the more composed cadets. Cover our rear. Moving, they advanced, not toward safety, but deeper into the simulation zone. Ethan's instincts told him the enemy's control point would be there, and that cutting it off was the fastest way to end the attack. Along the way, he set ambush points, used fallen logs and narrow gullies to funnel enemies, and placed cadets where their strengths counted most. It was working. One insectoid cadet, still shaken from the archives incident, glanced at Ethan as they crouched behind cover. How do you know where they're coming from? Ethan's eyes stayed forward. I've seen this before. Where? He didn't answer. They reached a ridge overlooking the enemy's makeshift base, temporary shield generators glowing faintly through the mist. 4 mercenaries patrolled the perimeter, more inside. Ethan studied the layout for only a moment before speaking. 2 fire teams. Hit both flanks at once. Keep them focused on you, and I'll go in. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It worked perfectly. When the flanking cadets opened fire, the mercenaries shifted to respond just as Ethan slipped into the base from the opposite side. His movements were silent, efficient. 2 mercenaries went down before they even knew he was there. A third turned just in time to see the human smile before a knee drove into his gut, followed by a strike that sent him collapsing into the dirt. Ethan reached the control unit and pulled a small device from his belta. Compact EMP charge. He placed it on the generator, tapped the activation stud, and stepped back. A soft pulse of blue light washed over the base as the shields collapsed. The mercenaries' weapons flickering offline. The fight was over in seconds. The surviving mercenaries fled into the simulated forest, vanishing before the Academy's security teams arrived. When comms came back online, the instructors flooded the arena. Shouting orders and tending to the wounded, Ethan stood at the center of it all. His uniform streaked with dirt but otherwise untouched. His squad looked at him with something new. In their eyes, not suspicion, not amusement, respect. From the control booth, the headmaster watched silently. Beside him, a council liaison frowned. "You saw it yourself," the liaison said. "That was not normal cadet behavior. It was a combat veteran at work." The headmaster didn't take his eyes off the human. Exactly, and far below. Ethan looked up toward the observation booth, meeting the headmaster's gaze. That same slow, unsettling smile touched his lips. The message was clear. This wasn't over. The Academy returned to routine after the simulation, but the calm was thin, like a sheet of ice over deep, dark water. Rumors about the malfunction spread fast. Official reports blamed a rogue AI drone swarm, but every cadet who'd been there knew better. They had seen real soldiers in real armor. They had seen blood. They had seen Ethan Cross moving through that chaos like he had been born for it. Some began watching him differently now, not just with curiosity, but with the wary respect soldiers give to someone who has survived more than they can imagine. Others watched with something else in their eyes, calculation, as if they were already deciding whether they could use him or needed to remove him. It was just past midnight when the hunters came. The dorm wing was quiet, most cadets deep in the artificial sleep cycle. Soft hum of ventilation filled the corridors, broken only by the occasional drip of condensation from the overhead pipes. In the shadows, black armored figures moved like smoke mercenaries, but not the ones from the simulation. These were different. Heavier armor, better weapons, and this time their mission was singular: Ethan Cross. They had studied him, knew his schedule, his quarters, his habits. They moved with perfect silence toward his door, one taking point with a breach charge in hand. Inside, Ethan sat on the edge of his bunk, boots already on, a combat knife balanced across his palms. His head tilted slightly as the faint sound reached his ears, not the heavy step of a cadet, not the patrol rhythm of Academy guards, but the soft, deliberate tread of people trained to kill without warning. The first mercenary placed the charge. Ethan's smile was already there when the door blew inward in a burst of light and shrapnel. He was gone from the bed before the smoke cleared. The point man stepped through, weapon raised, scanning for targets. He never saw the shadow slide. In from the side, Ethan's blade caught him under the arm seam of his armor, a clean, quick strike. The mercenary staggered, weapon clattering to the floor, before Ethan dragged him into the room and out of sight. The others didn't hear him hit the ground. Ethan slipped into the hallway before the second mercenary reached the door. His hands shot out, grabbing the attacker's rifle and twisting it upward before driving an elbow into the man's helmet. The impact rang through the corridor, and the mercenary's knees buckled. Ethan shoved him into the wall and stripped the weapon in a single smooth motion. The remaining 2 mercenaries fanned out, up, weapons sweeping the corners. One called over the comms target moving West Wing corridor. Ethan moved exactly the way they expected for 2 seconds. Then he wasn't where he should have been. The corridor lights flickered. Athan had already cut power to the section. Darkness swallowed them. Humans were supposed to be disadvantaged in the dark compared to certain alien species, but the files in the archive, if anyone had believed them, told a different story. Humans had hunted in the dark for hundreds of thousands of years, and Ethan was no exception. The first mercenary in the dark caught movement in his peripheral vision, swung his rifle toward it, and fired. The shot hit nothing. By the time he realized, Ethan was already behind him, twisting his neck in a precise, brutal motion. The last mercenary fired blind, shouting curses, the muzzle flashes illuminating the corridor in brief, frantic bursts. In the third flash, he saw Ethan too close. The butt of the stolen rifle slammed into his helmet with enough force to drop him instantly. The fight was over in less than a minute. Ethan stood in the dim light of the emergency strips, breathing slow and even. The corridor smelled of burnt metal and ozone. He picked up a dropped cum unit from the floor, scanning its channel. Static at first, then a voice. "Extraction team, report. Status." Ethan pressed the transmit stud and said very clearly, "They're not coming back." Then he crushed the unit in his hand. Alarms were already beginning to sound as Academy security finally responded. Ethan stepped over the bodies, moving toward the upper levels. He wasn't going to wait for the guards to clean this up. Someone had sent these mercenaries, and he wanted to know who. He made his way to the security observation deck, bypassing the cadet checkpoints without breaking stride. Inside, the headmaster was already watching the feeds, his expression unreadable. "We're here for you," the headmaster said simply. Ethan didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the still images frozen on the monitors, the black armor, the weapon models, the cum frequencies. Then he turned his gaze back to the headmaster. "Who sent them?" The headmaster's voice was low. "The same people who put you here, the council." For a moment, the room was silent, except for the soft hum of the monitors. Ethan's smile returned, slow and sharp. "Then they're going to need more men." The academy was under lockdown by dawn. Not the kind of lockdown they used for training drills or disciplinary sweeps. This one had teeth. Hallways were sealed, patrols doubled, and security drones hovered in the air like silent vultures. Every cadet was accounted for. Every cadet except Ethan Cross. By the time the sun rose over the Academy's orbital ring, he was gone from his quarters, gone from the dorm wing. And if the guards were being honest, stalled, ready beyond their reach. His file in the system remained, but it was little more than a blank sheet compared to the truth. The cadets whispered to each other, wondering if he had been expelled, arrested, or executed. None of them guessed the real answer. Ethan was in the Cums Tower. The tower wasn't meant for cadet access. The doors were coded for command staff only, and its main transmitter could punch a signal clean across the galaxy. That was why it was always guarded. But tonight, the guards were lying unconscious in a maintenance closet, and Ethan's hands were already flying across the controls like he'd been trained on this exact system his whole life. He didn't call the council. He didn't call the academy headmaster. Called Earth. The channel wasn't just secure, it was buried under layers of encryption. No one in the academy could crack without weeks of work. It came online with a deep, resonant voice that didn't ask his name. Authorization. Ethan's voice was steady. Black protocol. Cross Ethan. Priority 1. The council moved early. "They've already tried for extraction, failed." There was a pause on the other end, then a calm reply. "Confirm hostile presence?" "Confirmed," Ethan said. "And it wasn't a warning shot. They want me gone. That means the treaty's already dust." The voice grew colder. "Understood. Do you require pickup?" Ethan leaned back in the chair, eyes on the planet spinning slowly beyond the tower's windows. "No, I need them to see what happens when they hunt one of ours." There was another pause, longer this time. Then the voice said, transmitting deployment orders. "Fleet movement begins now." Line went dead. Ethan shut down the cum, wiped the access logs, and slipped out of the tower as silently as he had entered. Down below, the academy was waking up for the morning drills. Cadets gathered in the courtyard, still talking about the mercenary attack. Officers barked orders, trying to keep routine in place. No one noticed Ethan as he crossed the yard, his expression unreadable. Until one cadet, a young alien recruit with bright silver eyes, caught sight of his smile. It was not a smile of relief. It was not a smile of safety. It was a smile that said something terrible had just been set in motion. It's the kind of smile you see in the moment before a storm hits, that afternoon. The first signs appeared in the sky. At first it looked like a distant meteor shower, scatter of lights streaking across the upper atmosphere. Then the shapes grew larger. The Academy's orbital sensors scrambled for identification, but the speed was wrong. The profiles were wrong. These weren't cargo haulers or patrol craft. These were ships that carried their own gravity wells and burned with the signature of Earth's military drive corps. The alarm klaxons began to wail across the campus. Unidentified fleet entering orbit. Came the announcement over the loudspeakers. All cadets to secure shelters, this is not a drill. From the observation decks, students and staff stared upward as the ships broke through the thin veil of clouds. They were vast, armored leviathans, their hulls dark against the sunlit sky. Bristling with weapon batteries that could turn the surface to glass, a Titan-class battleship led the formation. No one on the planet had ever seen one this close. Even at rest, it radiated menace, its lines sharp, its sheer mass blotting out the sky over the Academy. And across its armored flank, in letters taller than most buildings, was the name HSS Retribution. Communications channels lit up with desperate calls from Planetary Defense Command. The humans weren't firing, not yet. But their presence was an act of war in every way that mattered, down in the courtyard. Ethan stood in the open, watching the shadow of the Retribution sweep over the Academy grounds. Around him, cadets whispered, in fear, wondering if they were about to be bombed. Ethan just kept watching, his eyes fixed on the flagship. And slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand to his brow in a soldier's salute. High above, the Retribution's running lights blinked. Once in acknowledgement,